Okay, welcome. This is the Tahoe Overland rig overview video. I no longer have the rig, but I wanted to make a video about it to sort of convey to all viewers the finer details of the rig that I had built. It took me about 2 years to build it out, here and there. Sort of chipped away at it for two different summers, and then I traveled with it in the wintertime. And it was a great rig. And now this video is, I can finally kind of share it with the world. So the engine was a 5.3 V8, typical GMT 800 engine. As you know, you're probably going to know that if you're watching this video. It had the 4L60 transmission, 410 gears front and rear. It also had a nitro Torsen limited slip in the back. And it had one transmission replacement during my ownership, and that was after some pretty hard driving through some really crazy rock gardens and driving through a lot of sand, not putting it in 4 low enough. That's one thing that I discovered that I did not do, was put it in 4 low when it should have been in 4 low. I'd climb up mountain passes and be at 13,000 feet and just with the engine bogged down when I should have been in 4 low. It was probably really hard on the transmission looking back. I did have a transmission cooler on it. I installed that after when I got my new transmission underneath it at 130,000 miles. And I didn't really have a problem from there until 160. It ran great, and it was all off-roading for most of that time. So that was good. It has a light bar on the front, and that's wired into a relay panel that I made. It's switched on the inside. And I ran it through my high beam so that I could use my high beam low beam stock to activate the light bar. It also had an AC block off kit and a rear AC block off kit, and then also a rear heater block off kit as well on it. So I tore all of the rear and heat and AC heater, the little cores in the very, very back with the fan all out. I didn't want to have to deal with that. Also, the tires are 315 70/17 Patagonia Milestars on 17-inch aluminum alloy rims. The aluminum rims are around 25 pounds a piece, so that was a bit on the lower side as far as weight goes. Then also the Patagonia Milestar tires were also light for a 35. They were a very light 35. So my wheel setup, I specifically chose to be a little bit lighter to hopefully get better gas mileage. That was the thought behind it. And I did not have any problems with the aluminum wheels. I never dented them or anything. So I know they're not as good for off-roading, but I didn't have any problems with them, and I'd totally buy them again if I did this again. The suspension was Bilstein 5100s all around, front and back, and a slight crank on aftermarket Torsen Keys. I wanted to keep the CV axles barely even flexed out. I didn't want to have to deal with bearings wearing out, so there was barely any angle on my CV axles, and that's part of the reason I went with the 3-inch lift as well. I didn't want to drop the diff or do any custom work like that. 3 inches of lift still kept my center of gravity low enough to where it wasn't as much as a 6-inch suspension lift, because those were my options, either 3-inch pucks, body pucks, or a suspension lift that was 6 inches. I just thought with the amount of gear that I carry on top of the rig, I'd rather keep the center of gravity a little bit lower and hack the wheel wells out and have a 3-inch body instead of 6-inch suspension. The roof was there was a Mega Warrior roof cage up there, and then a Thule, 100 watts of solar was also up there that was mounted right over the sunroof, and then 2 pop-up exhaust fans near the rear, just above the liftgate where the third tail light is. Those are manual pop-up exhaust vents that are absolutely critical if you're spending a lot of time in the rig, which I was. I was living in it at the time, so I needed to have good airflow. So the interior structure is a raised sleeping platform, and there's a lot of under the bed stowage. So there were hinged, I guess you could call them hinged hatches, I guess you'd call it, to access the stowage underneath the bed and areas around there. My electrical cabinet was also underneath the bed on the one side near where my feet would be. I didn't want to put the electrical cabinet over like where my chest or my hips were, just because I didn't want to get like radiated. You know, I definitely have a pet peeve about that. I don't want to have the electricity too close to my to where I'm sleeping or near my brain or something. You know, but the interior raised, it was interior raised sleeping platform. Cubbies were along each wall. So those were all custom built there. 3/4 inch plywood for the sort of the bones of the structure that kind of just house the drawers, and then 1/2 inch birch plywood for the finishing exterior skin on the Cubbies, and that's finished in polyurethane. The rear slide-out drawers in the back were just Home Depot rear drawer slides. There's also an interior pass-through to the kitchen, and the kitchen is on the driver's side passenger door, and the kitchen actually opens to the outside, so you can access it from the inside through that pass-through, which was very handy for making coffee in the morning, or you could go outside the vehicle, open the door, and make your coffee out there as well, which was pretty cool. But I usually ended up making coffee on the inside because I'm pretty lazy in the morning, and I don't like going outside if I don't have to. And there's cubbies and secret compartments pretty much everywhere throughout the vehicle, as you can see from the photos. I kept mostly clothing and blankets and sleeping bags and stuff in the cubbies, and then also just odds and ends as well. But a lot of clothing was in the cubbies, which really was nice because everything was always accessible. The electrical, like I mentioned before, I had 200 amp hours. Well, technically, I think I had 225 amp hours of AGM deep cycle batteries. There was one 100 amp hour battery, and then there was one 125 amp hour battery. In parallel, 1500 watt pure sine wave inverter. If I had to do it again, I'd go with a 2000 watt for sure, because I would boil my water with an electric kettle. So having 2000 watts is going to have the capacity to do that, whereas 1500 watt, I had to buy a smaller, lower wattage tea kettle, which is very hard to find, and it was kind of unreliable, but it worked. So if I did it again, minimum 2000 watt inverter for what I was doing, just so I can boil water in the morning quickly without having to light a gas stove. Super convenient, super awesome. I'm a huge coffee person, so having easy access to coffee was very paramount for me personally. Also in the electrical cabinet is a Renogy combo MPPT solar controller and DC to DC charger combination unit. This was awesome because it was 2-in-1. So the juice from the alternator would charge through this unit, and then also the solar panel would charge through this unit as well and float charge the batteries after the DC to DC charge, or while during it probably as well. You could probably do it at the same time. Technically, I don't know if it does it at the same time. Doesn't matter. It was an awesome unit, and I'd totally buy it again, even at its higher price point. Then you don't have to deal with two separate units, the charge controller solar and the DC to DC from the alternator. It saves space, and it's a seamless unit, and I never have problems with it. It was just so nice to have, to take the complication out of out of it, in my opinion. And we also had a 12-volt Dometic fridge, 28 liter. Great little fridge. I'd never go back to a cooler if I can help it. But it was an awesome fridge and just super handy to have. And it was between the two front seats, as you can see. It was an awesome fridge. And it was easy to access beverages while I was driving, which was pretty sweet. And snacks and stuff. The electrical usage, I had 200 amp hours, and with the fridge and then all of my camera gear, batteries charging, GoPros, my laptop, my iPad, I had to keep all that stuff charged on the road. And I didn't have any problems at 200 amp hours, although if I wasn't driving a lot, after a couple of days, the power would dip below 12 volts if I was using, like, charging a lot and there maybe it wasn't a lot of sun or something like that. So ideally, if you're doing heavy videography, kind of like what I was doing, or you have a lot of like appliances, I'd probably go a little higher than 200 watt. But it all depends on how much the engine's running and how much you're traveling. If you're just bouncing from spot to spot, 200 amp hours is plenty. Even 100 would be enough if you're not like staying more than a couple nights at a spot. But if you're gonna stay 2, 3, 4, 5 nights at one spot, you need that extra capacity for sure. But it really all depends on how you travel and what kind of setup you have. But for mine and what I was doing, I wasn't staying at places for too long. It worked out really well. There also, I had a switch panel where the rear HVAC controls used to be in the Chevy Tahoe, which is right above the center console on the roof, where the windshield meets the headliner in the center. I had a 3-way switch to the light bar. One was an override switch that I can turn it on during the night. If I hear like an animal outside, or if I hear some noise, I can turn the light bar on and sort of just shed light on the deep dark forest and put my mind at ease if I ever heard anything. And then I could also put it into an off position or switch it over to the switched light bar, which was wired to my, like I said before, the stock, the high-low beams on my stock. So I had the option of that, and I thought that was awesome. And then one of the other switches was for my air compressor under the hood, which I had to fill my tires up when I deflated them going off-road. As far as water goes, 16-gallon water tank. Had a little mini sink on the fridge, on the kitchen side, and a 12-volt water pump to run everything. I had a switch to isolate the water pump and also the fridge. And a quick connect hose to plug in a hose, so hose off people or equipment, sporting equipment, or just whatever. You could even I even washed a dog, with the hose, and I actually washed a horse once with my rig. Hosed a horse down, which was washing a horse after I rode it, which is sweet. So you use a lot of different things you can use a hose for. So that was pretty cool to have. And then also the drive, as far as driving dynamics of the rig, on dirt roads, it was amazing. I mean, the thing was built for dirt. I mean, it just loved the desert. It is a rig that absolutely loved the desert. Open roads, it doesn't matter if they were choppy or whatever, it handled them so well. Part of the reason is I didn't crank my torsion bars up too much to where the ride was so stiff. There was enough squish in the suspension to where when I was cruising over dirt roads, say there's a bunch of outcropping in the road, man, I could just cruise over it, and it was smooth, really smooth with the 35s at about 20 PSI. I mean, I was just so impressed with the way this rig handled dirt roads. And crawling in 4-low was great. Having the 410 gears, never had a problem. I'd crawl up crazy grades and not have any problems. Put it in 4-low or 4-low in drive when I was in sand, and it, for a rig of its weight, it handled okay in the sand. It's not going to handle great, but I thought it was very acceptable in the sand, and I never got stuck. So that was, and I the rig has seen some sand. As far as, you know, versus the Tahoe versus Suburban, I think the Tahoe's got a little better wheelbase. You know, it's a little shorter. It's sportier looking, definitely way better looking, in my opinion. And the Suburban's going to give you that extra room. So it really is a trade-off, you know. If you want to be cool, get the Tahoe or whatever. You want a little more practicality, maybe the Suburban's going to work for you. If I did it again, though, honestly, if I'm living full-time in the rig, I don't want the Suburban, for sure. Just have that little bit of extra room, because when I was living in this little Tahoe, it was a rough life. Just not having much space to stretch out. But it was a sick rig. There's no denying that. Affordability, like, these are so cheap. Like, for what you get, for how capable these are, like, you wouldn't have to do much to it to get off-road. 3-inch body lift, 33 to 35-inch tires, and stock drivetrain, 373 gears or 410, doesn't matter. Even with the stock G80 rear diff locker, man, these things are set up to shred dirt if you want them to. You do not have to do much to them, which is the reason why they're so great. And I can't say enough about them. And they have so much power, like, versus the Toyotas. Like, the V8s are just superior to, like, the Land Cruiser. Well, not the Land Cruisers, those had V8s, but, you know, like a 4Runner, but they still have more power than a Land Cruiser of its time. The 5.3 just put out just plenty of power. Like, as heavy as my rig was, it was impressive how much power you still had, even at that weight. I don't know exactly how much it weighed, probably 6,500 pounds-ish if I had to guess, but it was a heavy beast, and it was powered appropriately. I was getting about 14.5 miles to gallon on the highway, cruising at 65 miles an hour, and then in the city, 11.5. And I'd usually cruise at 65 miles an hour at roughly 2,000 RPMs. But that's the end of this presentation, and I hope that this rig inspires some people to build something similar, or just take a Tahoe Suburban, a cheap truck, or even a Ford Expedition or whatever, something that's cheap. You know, hopefully it gives other people ideas on how to convert their vehicles and get out in the desert or in the woods or wherever the open spaces where you happen to be living at the time. But I think a Tahoe Suburban is one of the best choices to do that. And I hope that this video can give you ideas to get out there and have fun and enjoy nature. Like, it has helped me out so much to do. But anyway, thank you for listening, and we will catch you in the next video. Cheers.